Cassie Ventura's stylist and friend Deontay Nash testified he witnessed Combs beating Ventura until her head hit the edge of the bed frame, drawing blood. He also testified Ventura confided Combs pressured her into unwanted sex with male prostitutes, telling him, "I don't want to go to the hotel and freak off with him." Combs has really been eyeing jurors looking for their reaction to all of the testimony of late. Nash, the stylist, is going to finish his cross-examination this morning.
Another alleged victim using the synonym Mia is now on the stand in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. She alleges that Combs used physical force, psychological manipulation, and threatened her reputation to get her to engage in sex acts with him.
Day 11 in Diddy's high-profile trial was nothing short of dramatic. Courtroom tension reached new heights when the defense filed a motion for mistrial, sparking murmurs and side eyes from every corner of the room. The motion, while ultimately denied, shook things up. The defense accused the prosecution of crossing a dangerous line, claiming they had subtly implied that Diddy may have tampered with law enforcement, either by paying off officers or manipulating evidence to spin the case in his favor. It was a bold accusation, and even though the judge shut it down, the implications hung heavy in the air. But just as the courtroom was bracing for more intensity, an unexpected and oddly refreshing moment brought a brief sense of ease. Enter Deontay Nash, a celebrity stylist known for working with stars like Cassie and Diddy himself. Deontay took the stand to deliver what turned out to be some of the day's most compelling testimony. Though he was there to speak on some pretty serious events, his natural charisma couldn't help but shine through. While examining a headshot submitted as evidence, Deontay couldn't resist lightening the mood. With a smirk and a twinkle in his eye, he jokingly called it a glamour photo, adding, "I look amazing." The comment sparked laughter from the gallery, offering a rare moment of levity in an otherwise heavy proceeding. But the smiles quickly faded as Deontay's testimony turned dark. He began sharing deeply personal and troubling experiences, first-hand accounts of Diddy's alleged abuse and control. He told the court how Diddy often used degrading names when referring to Cassie, like Ho, Cece, and Baby Girl. The emotional weight of those words alone silenced the room.
The testimony of celebrity stylist Deontay Nash, who testified that on one occasion he witnessed Combs beat his then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura until her head was bleeding. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his defense team says that any sexual encounters were all consensual.
One of the most chilling incidents Deontay recalled happened after the 2014 Oscars. He had styled Cassie for the after-party and was proud of how stunning she looked. But Diddy didn't share the sentiment. According to Deontay, Diddy flew into a rage, lifted him off the ground in front of others, and threatened him, furious that Cassie's appearance didn't meet his standards. Eventually, he forced them to completely change her look. That moment, Deontay said, left both him and Cassie shaken. As the courtroom absorbed his account, the gravity of the prosecution's case deepened. Deontay wasn't just painting a picture of abuse toward Cassie, he was showing how Diddy's reach extended to everyone around him. The defense began its cross-examination shortly after, but Deontay's time on the stand wasn't over. He's expected back tomorrow. And if today was any indication, there's still plenty more to come. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more intense in Diddy's trial, the courtroom pivoted from Deontay Nash's emotional testimony to a moment that could have changed everything. A motion for mistrial that sent shockwaves through everyone in attendance. At the center of this motion were two unexpected players, LAPD officer Christopher Ignacio and LA Fire Department officer Lance Jimenez. Their testimonies introduced a new layer of intrigue, one that brought Kid Cudi's name back into the spotlight, even though he had already wrapped up his appearance on the stand days earlier. Officer Ignacio started things off by recounting a break-in at Kid Cudi's home. He told the court that when he arrived at the scene, he spotted a black Escalade driving away from the property. While he admitted he didn't have legal grounds to stop the vehicle at the time, he did take note of the license plate. Later, that plate was linked back to Bad Boy Records. Yes, that Bad Boy Records. While it wasn't exactly a smoking gun, the implication was loud and clear. There might be more going on behind the scenes than anyone realized. Then things took a strange turn. Ignacio explained that 2 fingerprints were found on a door handle at Cudi's house, but not by the police. In a surprising twist, it was Kid Cudi himself who collected the prints and handed them over to authorities. Now, this immediately raised eyebrows in court. It's unusual, to say the least, for a civilian to collect potential evidence in an active investigation. Still, the prints were submitted in hopes they might help identify who was behind the break-in. But that wasn't all. Next up, Officer Jimenez from the fire department took the stand to discuss an entirely separate but eerily related incident: the arson attack on Kid Cudi's Porsche. The luxury car had been set ablaze in what many believe was a deliberate act of intimidation. Jimenez testified that fingerprints were lifted from the burnt vehicle, further tying the break-in and the arson together, at least in the jury's mind. Though there was no confirmed match between the two sets of fingerprints, the prosecution's presentation strongly suggested that there could be a connection, subtly pointing the finger at someone in Diddy's circle. And then came the real bombshell. Officer Ignacio revealed that the fingerprints collected from Cudi's house had been destroyed. No warning, no clear explanation, just gone. When pressed, Officer Jimenez stated that any destruction of evidence like that would usually require his sign-off, and in this case, he gave none. That detail lit a fire under the defense team. They moved quickly, accusing the prosecution of misconduct. From their perspective, it wasn't just about missing evidence, it was about how that evidence was being framed. Diddy's attorneys argued that the prosecution was deliberately planting seeds in the jury's mind, suggesting Diddy had gone so far as to pay off law enforcement or tamper with the chain of custody to erase anything that might incriminate him. Though the judge ultimately denied the motion for mistrial, the damage, at least to the atmosphere in the courtroom, was done. Tension thickened, whispers turned into side conversations, and the jury seemed visibly rattled by what they had just heard. With Deontay Nash's haunting recollections still fresh in everyone's minds, this new twist added serious fuel to the fire. Whether the fingerprint evidence truly linked Diddy to these incidents or not, the prosecution's narrative was now clearer than ever. Diddy wasn't just controlling in private, he may have had influence in places the public never expected. And with more witnesses set to take the stand, it's obvious this trial is far from over. As day 11 of Diddy's trial rolled on, what had started with explosive testimony and courtroom tension quickly spiraled into something far more complex. A battle over perception, fairness, and the power of suggestion. Following the shocking revelations around the destroyed fingerprint evidence tied to Kid Cudi's break-in and arson incident, Diddy's defense team went on the offensive. They didn't just dispute the validity of the evidence, they accused the prosecution of exploiting a deeper, more insidious bias: the public's distrust of the rich and famous. According to the defense, prosecutors were deliberately playing into a stereotype that wealthy celebrities like Diddy can buy their way out of justice. They brought up the jury selection process, pointing out that several prospective jurors had openly admitted believing that the rich often escape legal consequences. And now, the defense argued, the prosecution was capitalizing on that belief, subtly framing Diddy as someone powerful enough to manipulate law enforcement and erase incriminating evidence. Their motion for a mistrial was impassioned and intense. Diddy's lawyers argued that the mere suggestion he might be connected to the destroyed fingerprints was not just misleading, it was deeply prejudicial. If the fingerprints from Cudi's house and the torched Porsche didn't match, why bring them up at all? Their point was clear. The only reason was to cast a shadow of doubt over Diddy, using implication instead of evidence. And it didn't stop there. The defense claimed that the prosecution knew the fingerprints didn't match, but still chose to bring them up in front of the jury. That, they said, was textbook misconduct, planting an idea in the jurors' minds that Diddy might be obstructing justice from behind the scenes. By the time the courtroom learned that the original fingerprint evidence had mysteriously vanished with no authorization for destruction, the defense said the prosecution had gone too far. The message being sent to the jury, whether direct or not, was that Diddy had used his influence to cover his tracks, possibly even bribing law enforcement. But despite the fervor and stakes of their argument, the judge wasn't swayed. The motion for mistrial was denied. Instead, the judge issued a very specific instruction. Jurors were to completely disregard any testimony or evidence related to the fingerprints from Kid Cudi's home or his firebombed car. It was a clean legal move, but anyone who understands courtroom dynamics knows that it's almost impossible to ask a jury to unhear something that powerful. The damage, in many ways, was already done. While the day didn't end with a mistrial, it undeniably shifted the trial's tone. This wasn't just about who did what. It had become a larger conversation about power, influence, and how narratives can be shaped through implication. The defense had fired a major warning shot, one they'll likely circle back to if the verdict doesn't fall in their favor. But for now, the prosecution walked away with a win. The jury had heard about violence, manipulation, and now potential cover-up. Even if they were told to disregard the details, the story had already been told. And in a trial as charged as this one, that might be all it takes to tilt the scales. As the courtroom emptied out on day 11, there was a tension in the air that no one could quite shake. The judge's denial of the mistrial motion might have closed that chapter for now, but the emotional weight of what had just unfolded lingered. Sure, the jury was told to disregard the fingerprint evidence tied to Kid Cudi's break-in and the arson of his Porsche. But in reality, both sides knew it wasn't that simple. The defense had made their point loud and clear. They believed the prosecution was painting Diddy as a man who manipulates evidence, and people alike feeding off a public bias that powerful. Celebrities always find a way to dodge accountability, but despite their arguments, the court was moving forward, and so was the prosecution, full steam ahead. They weren't letting the fingerprint fiasco slow them down. If anything, it seemed to energize them. The prosecution leaned harder into a strategy they'd only hinted at before, showing a pattern of abuse. No longer was this case about a single incident or a few scattered allegations. They were constructing something bigger, a portrait of a man surrounded by fear, control, and systemic intimidation. One where Diddy wasn't just involved in questionable actions, but was allegedly running an entire culture of coercion. Deontay Nash's testimony had cracked open that door. Now, prosecutors were planning to blow it wide open. One of the most anticipated moments on the horizon was the testimony of Victim 4, who would take the stand under the pseudonym Mia. A former assistant, Mia was said to have been deeply embedded within Diddy's circle, someone with first-hand knowledge of how things really worked behind closed doors. Her upcoming testimony promised insight into not only the personal abuse she allegedly suffered, but also into how Diddy's team operated as a whole.
So Mia's testimony is going to be used to show several things. Once we're going to see the abuse, the violence continue. We also have to remember that she is an employee. So she's also going to speak to that forced labor. Again, that is part of the RICO and the underlying enterprise for criminal activities. And forced labor, as we know, is illegal if you're not paying people. So we see her talk about the long hours and other things. So that's also what her testimony is used for.
Prosecutors were betting that Mia would help bridge the gap between rumor and reality, between accusation and proof. They were building a case that felt more like a racketeering investigation than a celebrity trial, a system of control and cover-up, not just one man's misconduct. Meanwhile, the defense continued to play it smart, keeping their strategy technical and procedural. Their goal was to cast doubt on how evidence was being presented, not just what it said. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the bigger narrative taking shape, one that was less about legal minutiae and more about a reckoning with power. As court adjourned, one thing was clear. The story was evolving. This wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about the people around him, the system he allegedly built, and whether the walls were finally closing in. Tomorrow promised more bombshells. Deontay Nash would return, and Mia was expected to break her silence. With every new voice, the stakes were rising, and the truth, whatever it may be, was starting to come into focus.